Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Esoteric 𝗨𝗍. Before I bring him on, a couple of announcements. This summer, we're going to be filming a documentary. We're going to be traveling the country interviewing your favorite, my favorite authors, researchers, contactees, whistleblowers, and fellow podcasters about all the amazing topics I've covered over the years. But this is a big project, and we're going to need your help to get it going. If you'd like to help, you can leave a donation by using one of the links in the description. We have a Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal option. You can go to supportfkn.com or click that PayPal link. Like I said, guys, this is a big project, and I really think you're going to enjoy what we have lined up for it. Also, if you have a business and you're interested in advertising with Forbidden Knowledge News, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. We still have slots open for affiliates. Forbidden Knowledge News is available on Rokfin, Minds, Odysee, Rumble, all podcast platforms. We're banned from YouTube for another week due to another strike, and we don't count on being on YouTube much longer anyway, and neither should any of you. We have so many other options for you to get all of our content, such as Rokfin. Rokfin is where you get all our premium content. You also get all the premium and free content from every content creator on Rokfin. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+, or click the link in the description. Our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. It's also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. This is where we feature shows like Raised by Giants, Inception, The Ancient Gift, Quantum Guide Show, Understanding Propaganda, Day Zero, and much more. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Finally, check out our friends at 𝗖𝗺𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗄𝗃. 𝗖60, which may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man, has been amazing for my personal health. But check them out for yourself. Click the link in the description and you can get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Today I want to welcome Esoteric 𝗨𝗍. He is an unbiased researcher and writer of occult, conspiratorial, and esoteric subjects. With over 10 years of studies and experience, he provides fascinating facts and interesting insight. He is also the creator of entertaining videos and documentaries on his YouTube channel, Esoteric 𝗨𝗍 TV. 𝗨𝗍, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
Yes, man, I've been looking forward to tonight. Your work covers some of my favorite areas to discuss. Our ancient hidden esoteric history, which actually becomes more like sci-fi fantasy than anything we could really imagine in the false reality we have. And there's so much that we could discuss. There's so many areas that we could go into. I think that this could even be a two-part episode. There's so much we could talk to. Now, this is your first time on. I'd love if we could start with a little bit more about your background and what was it that really got you started researching these topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been researching this stuff, the esoteric, occult, conspiratorial for well over 10 years. I'm about to be 28 this year. My whole life has revolved around esoteric knowledge. I grew up in a Christian and Catholic home, so I was always intrigued by the Bible and its deeper mysteries. Had some strange experiences as a kid growing up that also led me on this path. And but I didn't start actually diving into this knowledge till I was around 12 to 14 years old. I started listening to certain hip hop music and started reading a lot of different books and watching different documentaries. And I guess really it started with the music subliminally, just hearing certain artists bring certain subjects up and that I wasn't familiar with that sounded fascinating. So that those songs and those lyrics led me to knowledge. And then coming across these different books led me to deeper and deeper things.
Right on, man. Well, I think a good place for us to start tonight, since this is such a broad kind of discussion that it covers so many areas. Your book, The Lucifer Mystery Revealed. Let's start there. Maybe you could give us a synopsis of your book.
Absolutely. So it's an academic perspective on the historicity of Lucifer within the church and the occult. So I take the reader through basically a historical and academic journey throughout the book to show them how I came to my conclusion as to who or what Lucifer really is. Because what I found is that we misunderstood and mistranslated ancient texts. And out of that misunderstanding, we concocted this archetype that we know of as Lucifer, but he never really actually existed within the Bible. We created it through our own misunderstanding, mistranslation, and later fanatical imaginations within the occult.
Right on. So how far should we go back when we look at the origins of this misunderstanding of Lucifer?
Well, it all starts with Isaiah, the prophet and scribe Isaiah in the Old Testament. It all starts there because he is the one who gave us the famous Lucifer verse, which is Isaiah 14:12, which is the famous, "O Lucifer, how art thou fallen?" So it starts with him, and then it progresses from there. But in the book, I go farther back than Isaiah. In Isaiah, we're talking about like 600 BC, around then. But the occult concept of Lucifer, and even the theological concept of Lucifer having to be related to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, that story and that aspect of Lucifer goes all the way back to ancient Sumer.
A lot of the stories that are based around human creation are found within the Sumerian mythos as well. What is your interpretation of the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve story?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating tale. And of course, it's in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament. And I view the Old Testament through the lens that it is borrowing, or even kind of in a way reshaping old world mythologies. For example, and the biggest example of this is the flood myth within the Bible. Now, we would view, Christians and theologians and just people who don't look into this deep enough would think that the flood myth is precisely just a Judaic myth. But it's not. Actually, it was borrowed or retold from ancient Sumerian versions. And in the biblical version, we have one God who is capriciously deciding, to kill mankind or to save mankind through Noah and his family. And that hesitancy that we see in the Bible is because it's borrowing from the Sumerian tale, where in the Sumerian tale, it's not one God, but two gods, two brother gods who are contemplating about this, endeavor. So if we take that into consideration, we can kind of start to look at the Old Testament through that lens, that they're kind of retelling the Sumerian tales in a more simplified, monotheistic way. So those two brother gods were the Sumerian Enki and Enlil. And Enki has been remembered by scholars, Assyriologists, and alternative scholars of all kind, as the witty, clever, wise scientist who was sympathetic to mankind, whereas Enlil has been remembered as the militant, vindictive deity who was regretful about our creation. So in the Garden of Eden story, if we're looking at it through that lens, we can pretty much assume that Enki is the serpent in that story, who is trying to give us knowledge and is being represented as a snake, whereas Enlil was probably Yahweh or God who was frustrated and angry about this taking place.
The most prominent information that from modern accounts that we get is from Zechariah Stitch about the Sumerian mythos. Now, there are many that argue that, a lot of his information was misinterpreted and misunderstood. What do you think? How accurate do you think was the information coming out from Stitchen's translations based on what could possibly have been reality?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I hold Sitchin in high respect. I think he was a pioneer, and he was the great aspect of his work isn't that he was 100% accurate. The great aspect of his work was this speculative aspect of it. The fact that he took the time to look at all the world's mythologies. I mean, he wrote a series of 7 books in the Earth Chronicle series. I think it's about 7 books, and in all those books, which I've read all of them, I have all of them, and some of his other books outside of that. And what's fascinating is he took the time to look at all the world's mythologies and piece together the similarities and narrate a storyline that makes sense. And that storyline is that a long time ago, there were the gods here on Earth. And then at some point, they decided to more or less upgrade the Homo erectus or Neanderthal man that was here, and jumpstart evolution and genetically engineer the Homo sapien. And then from then on, our modern civilization spawned, as mainstream science would tell us, about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. So the greatness about his work is the speculativeness of it, and how he took the time to piece that all together for us. But he wasn't the only one to really speculate that this story matter. As a matter of fact, I did a documentary on him on Esoteric Eddie TV, and in that documentary, I revealed that in an interview that Sitchin did back, I believe, in probably the 70s or 80s, he reveals that he learned that subject or that concept from an old rabbi, a rabbi by the name of 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗂𝗪. And in Judaism, there are a line of rabbi commentators on the Torah who are highly respected. As a matter of fact, their commentaries are taught or were taught in the synagogues as extra knowledge to go with the Torah. And this rabbi 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗂𝗪 was one of the first to postulate that the sons of God in the Genesis story, the beings who came down to heaven and mated with mankind and created the abominable offspring of the Nephilim, that 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗂𝗪 postulated that these Nephilim could have been extraterrestrial. So Sitchin, as a kid, actually learned that from him. And along with Sitchin, just mainstream Assyriologists have also concluded that Enki is without a doubt, the source of esoteric and wise knowledge in the old world that a lot of the occults and mythologies that came afterward borrowed from.
When we look at these so-called gods, Enki, Enlil, and basically all these figures from mythos throughout history that speak of godlike entities, do you think that these were possibly extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. But if we look at what the texts tell us, right? If the texts tell us that they were gods and that they came from the heavens, which we can assume was space, outer space. And so if I were to go by what our ancestors told us, what the texts tell us, I would say that they came from outer space. And whether that was like what Sitchin theorized, a nearby planet that orbits every so 1,000 years, maybe. But more recently, people have been also speculating that, yeah, maybe they were interdimensional travelers. But all that I do know is that they're not here anymore, seemingly not here anymore. And also what I do know is that all of our ancestors in the old world spoke about a calamity, a great flood or just some calamity that occurred. And after that, we kind of had to restart. And that is pretty evident in the archaeology around the world. So my personal belief is that there were a race of beings that we can call gods that weren't native to this earth, I would say, and that they were very smart and advanced and did jumpstart evolution to genetically engineer the Homo sapien. And due to wars and just arrogance and just, plain old getting old, they kind of died off because they were the minority. We started to populate and we became the majority. So as they died off or left or whatever, they became the minority. And what I can imagine that they just kind of just started to look at everything they've done and realize that, they made a mistake and that they're better off just leaving us to our own devices. And instead of ruling over us physically, they instituted religion. And here we are today, still venerating them through the religions that we have.
Right on. Now, unlike Stitchin's idea of the Anunnaki coming to basically use us as slaves to harvest gold, there have been other theories recently, possibly more spiritual reasons or maybe more energetic reasons, just using us as slaves for other reasons besides harvesting gold. I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think were the reasons for these beings to manipulate hominid DNA and create humanity?
Well, I think, yeah, they pretty much just created us to be slaves, and not like slaves in a matrix sense of it, like, like that's all they wanted us for, just to be slaves and not allow us to, grow consciously. I think they were just in need for workers, the same way that today we're in need for like AI technology. It was less about being like sinister and more about them just trying to come up with a clever way to get some help. And so that's how I view it. It was more about them just creating us so that we could help them out. And after they did so, they realized that it was maybe a mistake or maybe the greatest thing that ever happened.
Now, this idea of a false god or an Enlil like archetype that doesn't really care for humanity and possibly at times maybe have had a hand in wiping out large portions of the population. Do you think that this is somewhat the same story as you hear in, Gnostic scriptures of the demiurge or Sophia creating this type of entity that is a false god over humanity?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think there's always been that kind of motif all throughout human history. We've kind of always seen things as divided between good and evil, and we've explained that in different ways through different religions. But being that the Sumerian mythologies preceded that by thousands of years, and by the time Gnosticism came together, the Sumerian civilization and its mythologies were buried under sand and long forgotten. So I think they kind of just came up with that intuitively, not directly because of the Sumerian tales. I think that was an intuitive thing, actually spawned from Greek philosophy.
Now, do you think that it's possible that there are theological and very high level factions of not only secret societies and magical orders, but even beyond that, that know the actual truth and may have documented the actual history, real human history, that could coincide with this Sumerian mythos, that these factions are still around today holding this information?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Like, of course, we have the famous Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are a fascinating, piece of work, and they were brought to us by the American occultist Dr. M. Doriel in the 40s and 50s, who he claimed to have been contacted by some Tibetan monks and to have gone to go study in Shambhala with them, and that they gave him the permission to translate the Emerald Tablets into English. And for those who haven't read the Tablets of Thoth, they talk about the Atlantean era, and they talk about how during that era, these energetic beings crept into our realm and started to take over the subconscious minds of the Atlanteans. And Toth says in the tablets that it got so bad and to the point where he couldn't tell who was infected and who wasn't. And that was the real downfall of Atlantis, was that these energetic beings overtook our minds and caused us to destroy ourselves. And then after it all came crashing down, of course, then we have the legend of the flood and the legend of the priesthoods coming out of that, and then the two pillars of Enoch being erected, which had knowledge inscribed on them, the sacred sciences inscribed on them, so that mankind can learn how to restart civilization after the calamity and carry on the Atlantean priesthood. So I do believe that, somewhere out there, be it Shambhala or what have you, some benevolent congregation of ascended masters know what's really going on and are allowing the foolery to go as it needs to be, for the greater purpose.
Do you think that these gods were physical beings? And if so, do you think that the evidence that we have could be the elongated skull people or maybe giant bones?
I believe that the elongated skull phenomenon comes from the offspring of these gods and us. I think these elongated skulls, or I believe these elongated skulls are the Nephilim, the abominable offspring, with these deformalities and whatnot. But the actual purebred gods, um, I do think that they were physical at some point, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of years. If we go by what the Sumerian texts tell us, for example, the Sumerian king list, which is a physical cylindrical text, tells us gives us a list of some legendary rulers, and this list goes all the way back to 400, almost 500,000 years ago. So we're talking many years ago. So for their bones or their coffins or whatever to still be around, I don't think they would be. So there's not much evidence for them anymore, but I do believe that originally these gods were physical.
And do you think that that is the reason why scriptures like the Book of Enoch were intentionally not considered part of the Bible and left out?
Yes, absolutely. The Book of Enoch was highly regarded as canon, prior to the fourth century Common Era. Then it was excluded during the Constantinian dynasty through the Council of Nicaea when Christianity became a world religion. And it was excluded and condemned to be taught or spread around specifically for that reason, because it talks about fallen angels being corporeal and having direct relationship with mankind.
Now, as far as the Nephilim, is it possible that these entities were or are the same that could be responsible for a lot of the things that have happened throughout history, even going into our modern history today, that dictate where we're headed?
Yeah, I think it's a good possibility. Recently on my Instagram, I posted just a joke, but it's pretty startling. I mean, like Jacob Rothschild, right? He's got like an elongated skull. He's got a big head, and so there might some of these elites, right, might actually be the descendants of these Nephilim, and are in secret continuing the ruling that their ancestors had over us.
When going back to Old Testament stories of the Bible, what is your take on the story of Noah's Ark? Possibly could have had, some think, the DNA of animals and humans, and it might not have been a boat, but some kind of storage.
Yeah, Sitchin postulated that, and I think that could be true. It could be true. Of course, the story of Noah goes all the way back to the Sumerians as well, and in the Sumerian tale, the wording is different, and they do. And I guess Sitchin, he grew up in Hebrew school, so he understood, excuse me, Hebrew really well, and he understood that the translational errors were everywhere with the English and Latin and the Greek and all that kind of stuff. But when you read it in Hebrew, the ark seems more like a submersible thing, a submersible boat. And I guess apparently, if you read it correctly, it does say the seed of all animals as opposed to all animals. So I think there's some truth to that.
Do you think that these entities may have been giants? Do you think that they were taller than most humans?
Yeah, that's what the texts tell us. That they were giants and of greater stature than us. So I would assume that many of them were that way. But as most things kind of have devolved for humans, right? It's like we're kind of getting less bulkier. I would imagine that them too have kind of shrunken in size and lost that original purebred giant stature. But there are still things that might stick out to us, like the Rh negative blood type, or the cranial enlargement like Jacob Rothschild, or just the fact that some of these people live really long lives, like the Queen Elizabeth. just I think there are just small little things that are still remnant of the purebred genes.
Now, when you look at ancient stories that could indicate their civilizations had great technologies, such as the evidence that we have of building and construction of megalithic sites that we can't recreate. What kind of technology and how advanced do you think some of this stuff was that our ancient ancestors were using?
Well, my opinion on that has changed over the years, and I think that a lot of it was actually built by humans with very intricate techniques that we don't understand. Even today, we have artists all around the world that create works of architecture that are phenomenal. That if I were to look at it, I would think an alien built it. But I do think that there are the rare cases, like the pyramids of Giza, maybe Machu Picchu because of its elevation. And so I think there are the rare cases where some technology was used under the guidance of these gods. And uh, I mean, they definitely weren't using like Milwaukee power tools or stuff. They were probably using some different form of technology, right? Because technology, all it really is just us taking elements that are natural and putting them together. It's like alchemy, right? Like a sword is really just iron and fire. So I imagine the way that we build tools today is our specific way with wires and plastic and this and that. I imagine that they probably just had a different way of designing tools, maybe using crystal based technology and diamond based technology with instead of using cheap metals like we like to do, because everything for us is about making the profit. They probably use what they thought of was divine technology. So they were probably using very precious metals and minerals to build their technology, and probably understood anti-gravitational sciences as well to go along with that kind of stuff.
What are your thoughts about these gods having created this false matrix as a planet for us, that we are basically here under their control as some sort of slaves or prisoners for these false gods?
Yeah, now that's a deep one, and I think that I'm kind of with Sitchin in the fact that I think that the Anunnaki themselves even venerated a creator of all. I don't see the Anunnaki or these old world gods as the end all be all deities or creator of our universe. I think they were just as lost and just as trapped in this matrix as we are. They just had an upper hand and kind of, we're like the bully, right? And kind of just bullied us around or whatever, the big brothers, the big sisters. But I think the energetic beings that are controlling this universe or this reality go beyond the stories of the Anunnaki, go beyond the history of that, because that history itself is only, maybe at most 1 million years old, but the universe and reality, for all we know, is infinite. So I think the beings that are controlling this matrix grid and this false illusory reality that we live in are something vastly more sinister that we have yet to understand.
Do you think that would be something that some understand as demons or lower vibrational entities?
Yeah, I think that's one way to describe them. But I think even again, I think they transcend those titles, because those titles are just they're Christian ideologies, right? And Christian and Judaic ideologies, and that were also influenced from Zoroastrianism. So these are ideologies and concepts that are pretty young in the scope of the universe. So I think those are just ways that we use to cope with, to understand these beings, but they transcend those labels.
Lately, we've been seeing our own government, the Pentagon, the mainstream media, mentioning UFOs, putting out reports, putting it into the public consciousness. Now, I don't trust anything ever coming out of our government or media, and I've wondered from the beginning why they were doing this and what's the reason behind it. But I want to get your thoughts on it because it can't be good in my eyes, and I don't think it is anything like we are being told from those sources, and I'm not even sure that they understand what they're dealing with. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I share the same thoughts. I think for the most part they're being deceived. I think the government, these well, a lot of people that are coming forward with this stuff, it's not really like, the White House. I mean, the White House is partaking in this, but it's like these offshoots of intelligence, right? These retired intelligence guys like Luis Elizondo, right? All these retired dudes who are coming out, and I think some of them are good-hearted. Some of these retired intelligent guys who've been involved with like MUFON and the esoteric and conspiratorial community, who have been fighting in a way to get some of this knowledge out there. I think some of them are good-hearted and believe what they've experienced is real and think that humanity should know this stuff. But I think that the government and some of these intelligent organizations that are trying to get the truth out there are being somewhat deceived, because again, I think these beings are way more ancient than we know, and are way more sinister and deceptive than we know. And for example, as 𝗑𝗳𝗄𝗃𝗂𝗏 put it, the world-renowned UFOologist, him and Carl Jung, who also wrote a book on UFOs, hold a controversial opinion on UFOs and aliens as opposed to the rest of the UFO community. They think that these beings or this phenomenon is occurring subconsciously or within the conscious realm. 𝗑𝗳𝗄𝗃𝗂𝗏, I'm quoting from him, paraphrasing from him. He said that whatever these beings are, that they're trying to get us to build a mythology about them so that we can work them into our minds, thus into our reality. For what reason? That's what's up for question.
Do you think that these entities that we're dealing with today in modern times are any way connected to the Anunnaki or the mythos of the gods of the past?
My opinions on that have changed. Of course, like Sitchin would tell us that the gray alien were somewhat of like sentient robots, or basically just AI for the Anunnaki. They were created so that they could traverse, vast amounts of space without being harmed by, fast speeds or radiation or whatever, to go check up on us and different things. I think that's a possibility. And then but with these grays are just a fascinating thing, man. Like, and 𝗨𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏, for example, I did a documentary on him on the channel. He was the last 𝗤𝗎𝗓𝗓, or wisdom keeper, of the Zulu tribe of Africa. He tells many stories about these gray aliens, and of everything that he has experienced and went through and heard, he concluded for himself that these beings were actually us from the future, and that they were coming back to punish us. And that's why a lot of the times when you're under abduction, a lot of people will report being shown graphic video and images of the world ending. So I think they've kind of, whatever these beings are, they've obviously lost their emotional capability. They've lost what we would call soul, but they're very interested for some reason in our warfare and our destruction and trying to stop that, strangely enough.
That's very interesting. I've heard this before, and I've even proposed that these gray aliens indeed are us from the future, coming to warn us against the agendas we have going connected to technology and transhumanism. And that could be where they came from. We keep altering ourselves. We keep connecting ourselves to technology, integrating our biology, changing what we look like, interfacing ourselves. And maybe we do end up looking exactly like gray aliens, but there's lots of problems with that. And we're just coming back to say, stop what you're doing. And it's not too good,
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, man. I mean, once we start getting into like quantum physics and string theory and how there could be different timelines and dimensions, I think all of that stuff is plausible, and that's all a part of it.
Now let's go back to some of the biblical stories. What are your thoughts on the stories of Moses?
Okay. Moses, fascinating figure mythologically, and I've come across some alternative scholars who have concluded that Akhenaten was actually Moses, and there's some pieces of evidence for that. Akhenaten, of course, was Amenhotep IV, who broke off from the kingship to go start the first Egyptian monotheistic religion, where they worship Aten, or the sun. So there was a lot of similarities with Akhenaten and Moses. And Moses, even in the Bible and in esoteric teachings of the Bible, he was taught under the Egyptian priesthoods. So Moses is like this occult, esoteric figure who knew, Egyptian mysticism. And the Ten Commandments, from what I understand, and was somewhat, again, borrowed, or like a rendition of some of the Egyptian commandments coming from, I believe, the Book of the Dead. So there's a lot of meshing from the Egyptian mysticism into the story of Moses.
What about the archetype or story of Jesus? There are some that think that he never existed, some that think he was just an individual that went under a different name, Yeshua. What do you think about these stories?
Man, that's the most prolific one right there, and I do plan on digging into that eventually and making my own final conclusion.
Mhm.
I grew up, praying to Jesus and thinking it was real, and still somewhat have a relationship with that, energy and archetype. But I have read some things, and my conclusion right now is there's just some strange stuff there. And I'll give you an example, right? So it's like, supposedly there was an actual Yeshua, which is Joshua in English, who was a political leader during that time. So apparently there's some evidence for that, an actual political leader around that time who was named Yeshua or Joshua. And then, but you also have all these semblances of Greek philosophy influencing the New Testament. So I could see why there would be, a plot, I guess you could say, to create this mythology that has a lot of semblances to Astro theology and pagan religions, and is kind of telling a tale of how to awaken the consciousness and break away from the system. But what's also fascinating is just how much early Judaism kind of was repulsed by the idea of Jesus. There was a book by the name of the Toledet Yeshu that used to be taught in the synagogues, but it was dismissed at sometime in modern history, sometime in the second millennium. Sometime in the first millennium. But in the Toledet Yeshu, the Jews tried to kind of like reverse the idea of Jesus, and they said he was nothing but a black magician who actually found out the name of God, wrote it on a piece of parchment, slit his wrist, and then slid the piece of parchment in under his wrist, and that's how he was able to do all the magic tricks. So I just felt like if he was fake, why not just say he was fake, as opposed to trying to degrade who he was? So there's just a lot of things, a lot of questionable things with that mythology. And so as of right now, I don't know if he was real or not, but there's some deeper mysteries there that need to be looked at.
Now, in your eyes, do you think that the story of humanity is that we are indeed special beings with a divine spark that have a very intentful purpose and very divine purpose for being here, or are we just creations from these beings that are merely here for their scientific experiments and to find out what makes us tick, or is it like the story of Enlil that they've given us this divine spark, and one of them is jealous of that and did not intend on ever giving us that and wanted to remove it. And the other one does actually have some kind of compassion for us and wants us to evolve and grow into spiritual beings.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what happened. They wanted to just create us a benign, non-intelligent being that could just be used to work for them. But they just admired us. Some of them admired us and saw the potential in us and saw themselves in us. As the Bible says, God made man in his image. So I think that some of them, like Enki, admired us and saw the potential in us and upgraded us even further and gave us knowledge and saw that we could be taught and that we could learn and we could become worthy of sovereignty. And then some others like Enlil just kind of were just disgusted by the whole process, especially when they started mating with us. I mean, that was like akin to us, having sex with AI robots or something.
Now, do you think that some of these mythological creatures that we've heard about through ancient texts throughout the ages possibly still exist and are what are seen as Bigfoots or dogmen or cryptid creatures, and they're just entities or possibly even, interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings that we don't understand yet?
I think when it comes to like the cryptids and that kind of stuff, I believe those are just like interdimensional, like just strange beings from either interdimensional or like caught in our timeline by accident from wherever they come from. I think a lot of the monster mythologies are also like kind of dramatized. For example, like in the Sumerian Enuma Elish, which is the story of the creation of the solar system, it is told like a battle. If you read it, you think you're reading a battle between the gods and demons or monsters. And the great monster, the great antagonist of the story is Tiamat, who is described as a watery like dragon, but really it's a planet that they're describing. So I think, our ancestors read some of these texts and took them for face value as if they were monsters, but they were really cosmological tales of how our planets and our solar systems came to be.
What about some of these gods do you think are also just archetypes or astrological representations of planets and different energies in the cosmos and not necessarily physical beings?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on. I think the further we got from the Sumerian tales, the more the stuff got like psychedelic and fanaticized. But it's obvious a lot of this stuff has astro theology built into it, and kind of the same way that we'll name streets after presidents. They named planets or constellations after gods. So I think the gods that these planets or constellations were named after, at least some of them, were real beings that were just, or people that were just so great that were given that honor.
Now, what are your thoughts on the possibility that the communication with the gods was strictly achieved through altered states such as psychedelic or plant medicines, that our ancients used to do, these certain ceremonies or rituals, and under these effects, they would make contact with these entities and get the information and the writings and basically our history and instructions on how to go forward. Do you think that that's a possibility?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely like the Greek Eleusinian or Elysian mysteries, like where like this whole sacrament stuff comes from, drinking the wine and stuff like that. Yeah, psychedelics definitely played a part in our esoteric and mystical priesthoods, and I think that they were separate from the mythologies of the gods, and I think we kind of just coupled them, and maybe when they were tripping, they kind of believed that they were seeing these gods, but I think those are two separate things. The psychedelic trips and the stories of the ancient gods are two separate phenomena, two separate experiences. And I've done psychedelics myself, and I believe when you're on those trips, I mean, it's easy to like kind of fall into the illusory, ideas and thoughts and all that kind of stuff. But behind all of that, there is this like intuitive energy force, which I believe is something that precedes these archetypes.
Now, when you look at everything that's unfolding in the past few years and the awakening that humanity's going under and the realizations, do you think that we are headed to an age where we understand more about the nature of reality, being that it's an interdimensional reality, that we do possibly come from these beings, that we may have been created, and that the reason that we're going through all of this turmoil and everything is because we're going through a phase of awakening, and this is inevitable that we learn this about ourselves, and there are individuals that are attempting to stop this.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going through an awakening, and we're starting to kind of just grow up and mature as a species and realize the games that we have been playing, with ourselves, with each other. And but it's beautiful, and it's a process we need to undergo, and we need to understand that we as beings, we transcend these institutions that we continually box ourselves in, and we don't need to be afraid of this endeavor. We shouldn't be afraid of leaving behind our religions and leaving behind our beliefs, because our beliefs aren't us. We exist apart from those things, and we need to start focusing on reality a little more, instead of all this fanaticized stuff. I believe that what's going on is that energetic beings, for more or less, are possessing humans, and maybe they're tacking themselves onto humans that do have, vulnerabilities within their psyche or their genes, such as these Rh negative blood types, or these elites who are vulnerable to corruption and stuff like that. Kind of like the Atlantean story that Thoth tells us in the tablets. I think we're just being taken advantage of through our psyche, through our subconscious.
And do you think that everyone that is coming to these realizations and going through this awakening right now is a part of a specific group of people that's meant to come online during these times?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think that there is a certain set of people that it's their time. I think every generation has a certain set of people that were either chose to be a part of this journey, or are just being called to be a part of this journey. But yeah, I think there's a group of us, a community of us worldwide, who are specifically chosen for this generation, within this 100 years, to waken up and also help others wake up.
Now, do you see that there is a kind of war also right now on spirituality to get people to become more materialistic and turn away from spirituality? But I think that that's the age that we're heading to, is where they're trying to get people turn to a more materialistic age. Where do you see that in the grand scheme of what's happening right now with all the agendas?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Like intuitively, I believe that, like Christmas time, for example, right, which is like this lovey-dovey, like, I mean, Christmas time is has a strange energy around it. Everybody just feels different around that time for the most part. And I think intuitively, like in our ancient past, that was a time of renewal, right? Because we see everything's kind of dying around us. It's all getting cold. And then we're getting ready for the renewal. We're getting ready for the new year. We're getting, so all this paganism stuff that our ancient ancestors revolved themselves around, was used to be beautiful, used to be spiritual, because I mean, that is life. That's how life carries on, is through these cyclical things on earth, these cyclical things within our bodies. So I think back in the ancient times, we were more in tune with the cyclicalness of nature. And so, for example, like during Christmas time, people have postulated that the idea of elves and deers and Santa Claus and gifts and stuff like that actually comes from these ancient sacred rituals around Christmas time, where we would bring in the new year, where we would take mushrooms or different psychedelics, which were represented now as the elves and Santa Claus and reindeer, because reindeer, they're always around mushrooms and foraging around the forest. And I think that the gift used to be just nature. It used to be family. It used to be life. And but now it's like all of that has just been transformed to, it's like now Christmas is just like all about, exactly material things, just what's Santa going to give me? What am I getting for Christmas? It's just all this like physicalness, all this materialness. So I think there's definitely over the years been a huge shift in our spiritual awareness, a huge shift in our morals and what we view precious and valuable about life.
What are your thoughts on the possibility that these elites and those in control are practicing some sort of Saturn worship or Kronos?
Yeah, that's a fascinating theory. I love that one. And I like what 𝗬𝗿𝗍𝗂𝗍𝗂𝗍 has to say about it, how that Saturn is beaming a certain frequency at the moon, which is being used as a receiver to then shoot that down towards us at a more concentrated rate. And that process actually keeps us in this Saturn matrix. I think there's some truth to that. It's fascinating, and for some reason you do see Saturn everywhere, and Saturn is also represented as the cube. And I guess there is some sort of mathematical 666 built into the cube in Saturn too somehow. So that is strange, and we do live in a world in a reality of archetypes and of thought. So logos or images, subliminalism is the game that we are playing.
Do you think that reincarnation is a part of our existence? And if so, do you think that it's any way under the control of negative entities that are keeping us here?
Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Do you think reincarnation is a part of our existence?
Okay, I think it definitely does occur, but my mind has changed on that because I've read a book. I read a book a while back. It's called Coming to Life by one of the famous swamis. I don't know how to say his last name, but it's AC and something with the B. But the book is called it's called Coming Back. And he was the first one that brought it to my attention. He brought to my attention that reincarnation is it's not a belief system. It's not like Christianity, where it's not a doctrine meant to explain life and death that you follow. Reincarnation is something that you are supposed to avidly get out of. So we are supposed to, he says in the book that if you are human, you have already lived through the other soul phases, and you are privileged more than all the other souls because you have reached the highest level before ascension. So being human is the last phase where you get to decide, or where you have the opportunity to ascend or fall right back into the cycle. So my thoughts on reincarnation are just that there is a cyclical process with the soul. And if you don't ascend while you're human, and if you don't tap into your consciousness and remember that that's what you are, and that's how you need to transition over to the next phase, then you're wasting your time, and you're going to be recycled, consciously or not.
Well, let's end on this. Do you think that we live on the traditional model of a planet and the traditional model of space, or is it something different that we don't really understand? Maybe some understand, but the main majority of people don't. It's like a realm or a simulated reality or holographic reality, or even some kind of, flat plane. I don't think that the flat Earth is a good term anymore. I think we need to look further and deeper into it. But I personally don't believe that the traditional model of space holds up at all, and that everything that comes out of NASA is a lie. So where do you think that leads us?
Man, two of my friends just got into a debate about this the other day, and I love flat Earth debates. And I'll tell you what, I definitely don't believe what NASA and the mainstream is telling us either. For sure. I would love to go see it for myself, but in that debate that my friends were having, I kind of sided with one of my friends who said that we are that whatever it is we are on, via or quote unquote planet Earth, it's actually just an endless realm, and that we are just being told to stay here in this encampment, And I vibe with that. And I as of right now, that's where I'm at with it. I think that we are just being told that all we are is on this little earth of these, handful of continents, but really there's so much more out there.
Yeah, that is a fascinating idea of just endless land, and that land could be considered extraterrestrial land, and the beings that live there may not be what you consider humans. So that adds another layer to that, which is even more fascinating, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. Some people have postulated that like these Anunnaki or these gods, they were just, akin to us, but they were just on a different part of the realm and just kind of came here and stumbled upon us and just kind of like took advantage of us. Like, well, they're going to believe us, whatever.
Right on. Yes, man, this is fascinating stuff, and I'd definitely love to have you back on in the future to discuss more. Before you head out, let the audience know where they can find more about yourself, your work, your YouTube channel, anything you got going.
Yeah, absolutely. Fastest way to get in contact with me and just keep up to date with what I got going on is Instagram at 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. And I also upload monthly documentaries and videos on YouTube at 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 TV. Just released my recent book on Lucifer. You can get it on Amazon, or you can message me on Instagram if you'd like a signed copy. You can also order a paperback copy at esotericeddie.com, where I have some cool shirts and merch.
Right on, man. Well, thank you so much. That was fantastic, and like I said, we'll have to talk again soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll be talking again tomorrow.